Welcome back to Three Small Chat Rooms. I'm here with Dave Whitefield from Semiosis Australia and Andrew Thornhill from Clarity Enabled. And I'm just going to check with Dave that I got the name correct.
Close. Semiosphere, semiosis. It's all related. Okay. Let's just push on.
we can allow for these small mistakes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We're here today talking about what does SPoR look like when you try and implement it into an organisation? Are they ready? We talked about our own personal journeys last time and our readiness, but we thought we'd go and have a look at what it looks like inside an organisation. Dave, I'm going to throw to you. Take it away.
All right. So and there's some generalisations coming up, so stay with us. But one of the things that we've all shared in the way we talk about this stuff, and certainly shared in the learning and study that we've done in different cohorts, is I guess a moment where we kind of go, we think there's huge value in social psychology of risk principles. And so in your mind, you start going, everybody needs this. Yet the evidence would suggest not everyone does, because not everyone's using it, right, and applying it. So both of those two things can exist. But what we wanted to play with today was, I guess, recognizing that that's a really valid feeling, that there can be many people learning about SPoR and starting to go, wow, and yet still seeing a lot of resistance. And fortunately, one of the things we learned through SPoR, which is the concept of readiness, which is actually an educational concept, but through Rob, we've been exposed to it. Readiness helps at least give a context for it, and the concept that people and organizations need to be ready to take on these concepts. And that's what happened to us as students of SPoR. We all went through that. And obviously what we see is with clients sometimes where they go, well, where they're not ready, essentially. So we're just going to maybe share some. So Andrew, I might chuck over to you, and we're going to share some ideas of how we've seen readiness come up or not come up for some of our clients.
Look, I might start with the not come up side. So two recent examples. I'll go to a couple of examples. One was a professional services firm, very large firm, probably where, they did indicate they were looking for some ways of improving their safety. And when we went through that, I guess it's that a couple of challenges for them. They're, for initiating, they've got a very large workforce, so initiating anything new, they've got to go through executive leadership team and the board and be able to sell a concept and be able to articulate it. Obviously, we've had the benefit of studying it for a while. To put it into plain English is, it's not like simplistically selling a product and here will be the benefits. It's not a kind of simple solution. Here will be the benefits kind of proposition. So I think that was an interesting one, in that they also tend to do what a lot of organizations do, is look around, look at what do others in their industry do. So they aim for ISO 45001. They have wellbeing programs, but some of the stuff we're talking about is a little bit new as well. It's not necessarily coming up in the standards or the laws. And I'm sure some of you guys will comment on perhaps some of the worldviews behind even what you get taught if you go to a safety school. So when we turn up with something a little bit new, not simple solutions, quite complex, they were interested, but it was just a challenge for them, that they really had to be able to consolidate that. And, it's got to go all the way through to the board in that sense. The other one, I guess, was an example of a construction company who we do a fair bit of work around construction, but there was a recent one. They were looking for something new in their project risk assessment processes. And it's probably, again, a couple of things there. I think they had a lot of pressure to get the project going right now. It was sort of, by the time they signed the contract, things were already behind the times. Again, it was that, they're looking at meeting their client expectations, the regulator expectations, things like that. And SPoR's not necessarily coming up in that cohort of expectations, if you like. So they're looking at what's and also a little bit of a feeling, because we started to talk about culture a little bit, and they say their response was, we've already got, we're already all over that. We've got things in place, and not really, I guess, again, it's coming back to that, once we've had some time to be exposed to what SPoR offers, we can see the value, but, what was a compressed time frame, probably just not the time to really explore where they're at and what value, to help them understand what value SPoR can offer.
Do you find, sorry to interrupt, do you find, Andrew, that if it starts with basically, well, you convince us how it works and why it's good, that it's an indication that they're probably not ready?
I think that's a really critical point, isn't it? Because it's certain, we'll talk a little bit later about organisations that are more ready and approach that kind of state versus, that's right, if they're kind of still anchored to what they can get out of their safety systems, or they think they've got a fairly basic culture program already in place. Yeah, if they're asking those kind of questions, they probably haven't reached that point where they're really saying, where do we go next? Some of what we've invested in, what we've been doing, but it's still not leading to where we want to get to. That's where I'll throw over to one of the other guys, but that's where some of the clients are a little
it's
ready to.
Tricky, isn't it? Because we want to pick it up and say this is what's so good about it, but it's actually, there's already a signal there that it's probably not going to work. Anyway, Matt, what's your experience?
Great point there, Dave. So we're all consultants here, and we all have a certain amount of clients given the time of year. Do all your clients use social psychology of risk and all the tools and everything involved?
No, we've talked about this, obviously, between the three of us. I'm a bit fortunate that I think I'm a bit further down the path for some, but well, I just shared, right? I've still got a client that is towards zero, still on their stuff, and I'm just sneaking in the back end for them. And I've got to be very careful. Where have I got another client that had already seen social psychology of risk, and they were like, we want to introduce this. And I didn't have to do any conversion or anything. So there's a really different experience for that one. What about for you, Matt? Have you got that variation?
I've got, and it'd be weighted against SPoR. Most of them are traditional safetyists. Some are even, and I'm trying to move them away from it, but zero harmers and behaviour-based safety. They really believe, that is the way to go, obviously. That's not what we're about, but it's definitely what they want. And I find a bit of fear in the readiness department as well. It's not a small thing that we're talking about. So we go to the cultural areas, we go to the psychological areas where people are not well versed. It's not a traditional part of the curriculum inside safety. It can be really scary, and we've got a lot of people who just aren't equipped.
I think too, Andrew, you mentioned that it's, to my experience, it's got to go through senior leaders at some stage. So often we get in, so again, we mentioned this earlier, we're externals, and we're trying to we want to have some empathy and shared some experience for people who are internal, and probably it's even harder because you guys see the SPoR stuff and then be like, oh, I want to roll this out everywhere. And we only see it as consultants coming in, where we sort of go, they say we want to do some culture work, but we can hear they're still really embedded in behavioralism, and they're not ready for that. But there has to be that senior leader conversation at some stage. Otherwise, it's just plug in and fix, right? And it's just not going to get there, I don't think.
Yeah. And it is a philosophy as well. The social psychology of risk has a fair philosophy behind it, and it doesn't. You don't do it by halves. Just like zero, you don't do.
If you're going to go all in, yeah.
Zero harm. Yeah.
Totally brutalise people. Well, don't do it by halves. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to do it all in. And and that's a scenario. If you're going to do anything, I suppose, in life, you don't half commit to your marriage. You go all in. Yeah.
Which is probably part of the skill that you build up in SPoR as you start working in it more, is being able to pick where organisations are philosophically. I think too, that's certainly been my experience of balancing my want to convince other people that this is right and a good strategy versus hearing it. And I've shared just earlier offline, obviously, that a client or a potential client put out a tender saying they wanted a culture maturity program. But when I got there and was in the room with them doing my pitch, they wanted behavior-based safety. And it was at that moment, finally, and I still think I went too long on what I had before really asking them where they were. And at that moment, it was like, not ready. That's okay. Come back and see me when you are, sort of thing. They haven't come back yet, so clearly not ready. Should we talk a bit about that? Well, what does readiness sound like? Because we make it sound all doom and gloom, but what are the cues, or what are some of the things that we hear that maybe is an indication that organisations are readier?
I think some organisations have a fear that they need to change everything that they're currently doing. And again, that's not the way of social psychology of risk. It's a transdisciplinarity approach. So you've got systems in there that I'm certain are going to be great and don't need to be changed. We're looking more at how we humanise those systems.
From my experience, I guess the indicators that organisations are a little bit more ready for change is when they start to articulate or recognise that some of their own previous approach or systems are, and they've often invested heavily in them, aren't quite delivering what the outcomes they're looking for, or they're having repeat issues or things like that is probably some of the indicators that, hey, perhaps they are in a space where they're a little bit more open to, you know, what else is out there, even if it is slightly more, even if it's something they can't name, like a safety audit or a safety.
Yeah. Do you think that's part of the language? And this is interesting. I'm just trying to listen as we do this, right? Of their language shifts to kind of what else rather than like what instead, or how do we fix this? It's almost like they do start realizing it's a and, not an or. Maybe?
Yeah, there's got to be more.
Yeah. Which can sound like more work, acknowledging that.
Yeah, look, I mean, some examples would be construction companies who've got decades of investment in their safety management systems.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not going to be a fix for everything. And I've seen some very, very good safety systems, but it is, yes, around that language to say, well, yeah, what else, or what next, or what could we do better? That kind of language.
And I suppose there's times we can help with that, but I think you've got to be careful of clients going, well, like I often get in on safety leadership kind of workshops and training because it's an easy in, and then I've got to work out what do they actually want, and I'm pushing towards basically more humanizing approaches. But they go, we want to do, you know, role plays on courageous conversations, and I'm like, yeah, you know, how's that? Like, and I don't basically, but it's, you know, how's that worked out? And they go, yeah, it doesn't seem to work. Okay, you know, okay, well, what if we tried this instead? Or it's that easing them through it rather than this is what you need. I think that's to our lesson, right? Is you arrive and go, this is great, and SPoR will, at risk of its really bad language, but I still find myself saying it, is, you know, SPoR will fix, you know, or improve or whatever, which is terrible language, and we don't fix, it's a wicked problem we tackle. But
certainly the need for kind of skilled conversations to understand exactly their perception of where they're at and what they're trying to do, because yes, you don't, given it's not just a simple, straightforward solution like a safety audit, you don't want to sort of be saying we can bring value here if they're really trying to, you know, not if they don't understand where they're at or where they're trying to go. So
yeah, I think that's part of it, isn't it? Is working out the philosophy existing. Are they stuck in a legal orthodox view, or a behavioralist, or a systems thinking, or a process safety is being able to work out. So even when they say there must be something else, it's like, well, what do you mean? Ask that question, get them telling stories.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because there's almost, and sometimes it can be coached a little bit by us, but a little bit of a shift, because if they're still anchored to something, you know, whether it be their systems or whatever, and we introduce something new, and particularly if there's some, if they're not really committed and some are internally a bit more detracted towards that rather than a supporter, then that can make what we do a little bit harder to stick, if you like, or sustain itself. It is a bit of a commitment to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as Matt said, but to really start looking at risk and safety from a different paradigm, if you like.
And it is hard because it is a whole organisational approach. It's not a section of your business. To be done well, you want everybody doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's a big paradigm change.
I'm also selective about how I do frame it. Like I'm you know, sometimes SPoR is unknown, so people haven't heard of it, and so I'll actually stay away from it and use things like leadership or people or culture, because at least that's a known idea, even if I'm trying to use a different paradigm within it. So it's definitely about that, constantly testing the water. How ready are they for a new idea or a different approach?
Well, they're terms that get talked about in boardrooms and things like that, aren't they?
Yeah.
SPoR isn't. And look, I probably would note too, we're talking about a level of complexity with SPoR, and yes, we've had the benefit of time to study it, but I think certainly one thing Rob Long's done very well through Human Dimensions is through some of his training and the support material, he certainly provides a level of, things, practicality to it and things you can apply straight away, whether he's coaching, a group of managers or supervisors. Here's some cue cards and things you can take away, or you apply in the sessions and you can take it away with you straight away as well. So I think, I don't want to scare everyone off saying this.
I think that's a good point. Is I think you do need to be able to articulate when somebody is ready and they say, not convince me, but okay, what does it do or what does it look like?
Yes.
You do need to be ready with some examples of going, well, in this, we can help people engage with other people, or we can give you tools to help you understand, what's happening at a cultural level. For example, headspace, group space, workspace.
Exactly.
Then it bites it down for people and they go, oh, okay, there's something there rather than just a whole new philosophy.
And I think we need to put out there that there is a program attached to the social psychology of risk that we can take any organisation as far as they want through this scenario, and that there is tools there that are readily available and usable.
Well, even within SPoR, right, there's different slices of that, and we see different people who have. I spent 6 years trying to work out what was my slice going to be, and I've definitely moved towards just that cultural bit. But others are at the people, and we see people have gone into resilience and risk intelligence and a whole range of stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, the three of us got together and spent 2 days talking about
yes,
our part of the part.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and it's an interesting concept just that one in itself.
Yeah.
To just backtrack a little bit, probably without just sort of not moving on from the question we just proposed before too, just the interesting example for me with that construction company I mentioned, we could look at their current risk registers, and a lot of a focus on physical hazards, as there should be, falls from height, electrocution, et cetera, very important. Then when, what was interesting is we started to talk about some of the SPoR concepts, and they still didn't quite shift. It's this readiness issue. They weren't ready to shift, even though I could show them, here's 2 or 3 different coronials where let's work through them and break them down. The coroners are identifying all these other psychological, cultural factors that have contributed to those incidences, and they still wouldn't move. So there's just, I think that readiness issue is critical.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, Andrew, because you were saying that they understood the principles.
They did, yeah.
Yeah. But the application of the principles was a step further.
Well, that's 100% right. And I've had that with some other organisations as well, where, they get the psychological organisational risk layer, but do they really take it the next step and start to build it into their systems and risk assessments? No, they don't. So,
just really, as a sideline, we should probably think about kind of wrapping up. Like, what's for me, my timeline with clients is at least probably 6 months, if I think about it, from sort of an engagement to conversations to working at what they want. It would be exceptionally rare that somebody goes, maybe a keynote or something where they go, this is what we want, but still there's always an extended time period of conversation of working out what it is. And again, that contrasts with the fix approach. We want to buy this off the shelf. So I don't know, and again, I guess we share that because we're trying to say this is the normal in our experience. So if it takes a long time internally, that's probably the norm. So
it's a consultancy, isn't it? It's at least a dozen contacts with a potential client.
Yes.
Trying to get a message across.
Yeah. Would you guys be in the months for that sort of conversation normally?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, that would generally be the case, unless they've got, I have seen a case more through Dr. Rob Long's work, where I think he has had cases where they've had a significant incident and the very senior management ELT are all over what can we do next. So they're more in that state of readiness. They're already driving it down.
Well, it's interesting though. You don't know what they want. Like I've had clients say, can you come and run this because we need to fix something? And I'm like, this is not going to go well. But yeah, I think that's the tricky part is this is all long burn stuff, right? It's conversation and engagement and relationships and it's tricky.
Yes.
So thanks, Dave. Thanks, Andrew. That's great. We'll just put up on the credits as they roll through the links to the Centre of Leadership and Learning and Risk, the website for Social Psychology of Risk, and for Human Dimensions with Dr. Robert Long. Also, the books that had been written by people through the social psychology of risk. There's 9 available free. So if any of this has tweaked your interest, give them a click and see which rabbit hole it takes you down. And of course, we're all available for consultation. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, boys. Thanks, everybody.
Nice.
Yeah.